Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back once again to another installment of everyone's favorite short show. This is Storytime with Jimmy, with longtime WWE referee Jimmy Korderas, where he shares with you some of the many, many stories that have happened to him over the course of his long and illustrious career. And Jimmy, this week, I want to hear about what happened following the Montreal Screwjob. Because I believe you mentioned something once about a storyline that could have happened that never actually did.
Oh, yes. It was going to involve the late, great Owen Hart. After the Montreal Screwjob, obviously, everyone knows Bret left for WCW. I don't know if it was for greener pastures, but if you're talking money, it was greener pastures. And, you know, Owen was still under contract and they weren't going to release him. So they had come up with an idea that Owen would eventually come back. He'd take a little time off. He'd come back and surprise everyone and defeat Hunter for the European Championship with a little help from a Canadian ref. Thus,
I think there was only one under contract, right? It was just you?
Yeah, it was only me.
Yeah.
So,
you were the guy.
Cat's out of the bag now on who that is. So I would help Owen in some form or fashion defeat Hunter for the European Championship. There would be a little bit of a Canadian army, so to speak, of Owen. I believe Tess was going to be a part of it. I was just hearing bits and pieces because it never came to fruition, because about 2 weeks before that was about to happen, Hunter had an accident in the ring where he collided knees with Mick Foley. And I think it was in a tag match, and Hunter dislocated his kneecap. I mean, it was like pretty much on the side of his leg.
Oh, God.
So, you know, which put him on the shelf for an extended period of time. And once he got healed and back, that was put aside. That whole angle was put aside. And I kind of look back at it and go, maybe that was a good idea that it did get put aside, because I remember back to people like Danny Davis and other famous quote unquote heel referees.
Nick Patrick.
That doesn't last long.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm glad it didn't happen in a way, but at the same time, it's kind of like, oh, it would have been cool. At the same time, not quite like Little Nate. I wouldn't want to get into tag matches, but
the funny thing is, I think every hardcore fan has heard stories about the Clique. Everyone has heard about the BSK, right? The Undertaker's crew of buddies. Probably lesser known because it never really operated in any official capacity. But I remember hearing all the way back to the late 90s about the Canadian Mafia.
You're right.
And that one is very, very much on the inside. And it would have been interesting to see the Canadian Mafia. Obviously, they would have used a different name, but it would have been interesting to have seen that come to television in that way. I think the tough part is your entire angle, your entire storyline would have been based on a guy who's no longer there. It would have, the whole story would have been revenge for Bret. And
right.
History would tell us the former chairman of WWE doesn't like shining a spotlight on a guy who's not even working for you, because there's no way to pay it off.
Yeah. The tricky thing would be not mentioning him as part of the reason why, like you said. But if it was something that could have been dragged out for a long extended period of time, AKA the bloodline, like they currently did.
Right.
Because once Bret's deal was done, like we've talked about this before, was it a work? Was it a shoot? Either way, when Bret's deal would have been done at WCW, can you imagine him coming back?
To captain the Canadian Mafia?
Exactly. That's money, brother. That's money.
Who, just to throw it out there for fans, from what I was told back in the day, the Canadian Mafia, which is basically just a bunch of Canadian buddies that worked for the company at the time. But who was actually part of that? It was you, Edge, Christian, Val Venus, Test.
Yeah, that was Test. Yeah, no, that was pretty much it. I mean, like the fellows from Quebec were kind of like affiliated, but not exactly.
So really, it was the Ontario Mafia.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. You could even break it down to the
Greater Toronto area.
The GTA Mafia.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm trying to think off the top of my head because Lance Storm didn't join till much later.
No, he came in later. He was more of an un-American.
Right.
You know what? Believe it or not, somewhere in the gallows of Korderas Manor, I still have an un-American shirt, and I'm tempted to bring it out, but I'm afraid. Like Tony Khan, I'm afraid for my life, so I won't do that.
Let me ask you this last question about this story. You said you wouldn't have been crazy about the idea of being a heel referee, thus turning yourself into a character on the show, which I think is probably the right mindset for any official to have. You don't have to name names. Of course, I always prefer when you do. But were there other zebras that you were working with at the time who would have loved that opportunity to have become a character?
Oh, I'm pretty sure there were, because going back to the strike angle where I was the scab referee, there was one in particular that when they dragged me out of the ring at No Way Out and they all, put the boots to me, there was one in particular that was a little extra
zealous,
a little extra energy behind it. Somebody, either he didn't know enough to kick with the flat end of his boot or his shoe and you use the pointy toe. And I thought my kidney would come up through my lungs, but
why did you do that, Kyoto?
Yeah. Oh, you noticed. You noticed who it was. Receipts coming. It's not over yet.
Yeah, those receipts have no expiration date. Ladies,
I understand some people's some referees would love to have that opportunity to be a character and be prominent, but that wasn't my deal. I'd rather be in the background.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another fun installment of Storytime with Jimmy. If there's a superstar or a particular time period that you want to hear a story about, just get at us. Questions at hugepopradio.com. Thanks, Jimmy. That was a lot of fun.
Anytime, brother.